And then you do need a motion to go into the closed as well, a motion and a second. Okay.
Meeting is live.
Joan, I don't see a link to a separate meeting on my calendar. Was it sent?
No,
Or
if it's the same link.
Same link. Okay.
So we don't go out of this one then?
Yeah, you'll need to leave this one or it'll be live broadcast on YouTube.
Yeah, okay.
And you're ready to go.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Stillwater Area Public Schools, District 834 on January 26th, 2021. Can we, and Joan, can we take the roll call?
Director Hockert,
Here.
Director Onken,
Here.
Director Porbeni.
Yep.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Sherman,
Here.
Director Weisberg,
Here.
Chair Petrie.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We are now planning to go into a closed session for attorney conversation. A closed session is scheduled pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.05, subdivision 3B, for a confidential attorney-client discussion regarding pending litigation in the matter of ISD number 834 versus EN Properties LLC. Can I get a motion to go into closed session? Director Hockert. A second? Director Porbeni. Joan, can we take a vote here?
Director Hockert,
Yes.
Director Onken,
Yes.
Director Porbeni,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Sherman,
Yes.
Director Weisberg,
Yes.
Chair Petrie.
Yes.
You have a 7-0 vote.
Great. Thank you, Joan. We are going to leave this meeting and go into the closed session. And when we will return, we will have an open meeting to discuss the learning model. All right. See you in the closed meeting.
Hey team, I think that Joan is creating a separate link and sending it to you guys now.
Are we in the wrong place?
Correct.
Oh, great. Okay.
But I don't think there is a link for the other place. I don't think it was created. So she's going to send it out to everybody right now.
Okay. Sounds good. So we should leave here then, right?
Yep. Leave here. Check your email. If you get lost or it doesn't show up, you can call me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, that's not it.
Chair Petrie, we're
Yeah.
checking on Director Porbini to make sure that she can get on.
Yeah, I just texted her to see if she was going to be getting on. And did we lose Allison as well? I don't see her now.
I see her, but I don't see
Yeah,
her.
she's here.
user.
Is she here? Okay,
She's logged in anyway.
okay. Saw Annie there for a second.
Yeah.
All right. So too many links. I got confused there.
It's easy to do. Are we ready to go ahead?
I think we're ready. Yep, I
Okay.
believe everybody's here.
Great. All right, we're finished with our closed meeting, so we're going to resume our open meeting with our first action, which is approval of the agenda. Would someone like to make that motion? Director Hockert, second. Director Sherman? Great, thank you. Joan, can you take that call, roll call?
Yes, Director Hocker,
Yes.
Director Ankin,
Yes.
Director Porbeni,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yeah.
Director Sherman,
Yes.
Director Weisberg,
Yes.
and Chair Petrie.
Yes.
You have a 7-0 vote.
Great, thank you, Joan. We have one action item tonight. It is a discussion of the learning model change. Superintendent Lansfeld.
Thank you, Chair Petrie and board directors. Last week, I shared information about the district's plan to slowly bring back students to school, which included a recommendation to return 6th through 12th grade students to in-person learning over the next several months. To ensure a safe return to school, the recommendation is for secondary students to begin returning to school after all elementary students are in place, as reported during the January 21st, 2021 school board meeting. This evening, administration is recommending the school board approve bringing students in grades 6 through 12. Students identified for in-person support would return on February 16th. On March 1st, students in grade 6, as well as 4-5 gate students would return. All 7th through 8th graders would come back on March 15th, and 9th through 12th students would return on April 5th. And with that, I'd like to just do a quick review before you make a decision. And looking at the data, we do know that we're still taking this into consideration for our secondary students. Last Thursday, the Washington County rates were 50.25 per 10,000 cases, which would still put us at distance learning for all students. We're hopeful with the vaccine and all of the mitigation strategies that we've been putting into place, that this will continue to hopefully go down during the upcoming weeks and months. But at this time, it would still be distance learning for all students. Okay, so right before winter break, the governor and MDE and MDH came out with changes to Minnesota's Safe Learning Plan, which prioritized bringing our youngest learners back to school. This lessened the focus on county data for our youngest learners as a singular determining point when considering learning models, but it's still applicable for our secondary. It provides new guidance on mitigation strategies for in-person learning, which I'll speak to in just a minute. And it utilizes a slow, what we call rolling start, to bring students back to ensure a safe return. Why these changes? Prioritizing academic and social needs of our students to get them back in school. And we've also learned more about COVID and how it spreads. Masks, distancing, and hygiene are making a difference. And we've seen examples of other schools across the country and in other countries doing so. So Minnesota's Safe Learning Plan with the changes that were updated on December 26, 2020. We now have at all of our school sites an optional COVID-19 testing that's provided twice per month for staff. We just had one this past Monday, and first
there I am.
testing was
All right.
2 weeks ago.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, so our staff strongly recommend, not required, but strongly recommended and encouraged to wear face shields and face masks together whenever possible for our adults. We're also recommending 3 feet between students in classrooms. We know that that can't always be the case, especially if you've ever taught kindergarten or preschool, but it's highly recommended. And then 6 feet between the students and staff and all adults. Clear barriers with plexiglass between staff and students when closer than 6 feet when they are providing instructional activities, that it's not possible to put that spacing between them. And then also 6 feet between students in the cafeteria. We did find out, as I spoke to last week, elementary classrooms can be 3 feet apart in the cafeteria, but 6 feet apart between other classrooms or other pods of students. But at the secondary, they're still recommending the 6 feet of distancing. Why a slow rollout? We want to prioritize the safety of our students and staff. We are prioritizing the youngest and most dependent learners to get them back into school first. We want to address operational staffing capacity. We did have to shut down a number of schools and ultimately the district because of our operational capacity or lack of staffing earlier in the school year. We want to avoid the hybrid learning model. We know, and we can speak to this a little bit later, that the hybrid learning model was not as engaging. Students weren't as successful in that as the distance learning or the in-person model, and it was a heavy workload for our staff. We want consistency to minimize moving back and forth. We don't want to all of a sudden transition into an in-person learning model and then have to go immediately back into a distance learning model. The fewer transitions, the better it is for students and staff. We also want to align with grading periods at the high school. We are on a semester grading system. And I do want to note that we do have a number of neighboring districts that are on a trimester system where their grading will, their grading time will change on March 15th, I believe, where ours starts new on April 5th. And then we also want to monitor COVID-19 infection rates and quarantines. We're still tracking those closely. And a vaccine rollout. Great news this week. Last week we were allocated, our district was allocated 17 vaccines for staff. This week we hopefully have 369 and the letters are going out tonight to our staff. Safety considerations. We want to consider exposure, potential students and staff. We do know that our older students, they are considered to transmit more like adults and they have more mobility. A lot of our students have driver's licenses. They're able to be more social and there's a lot more exposure. Movement between groups and classes. We do know at the elementary school, it's easier to contain classes and groups of students, where at the secondary schools, they are transitioning between classes during the day. Physical distancing students, we do know the class size can be a bit larger at the secondary schools, and it can be difficult to try and maintain that 3 feet of distancing. And cafeteria capacity, all 3 of our secondary schools, we will need to look at alternate sites or spaces to make sure we can provide that 6 feet of distancing. So our recommendation last week, February 16th, and I do want to stress, we are bringing secondary students back beginning February 16th, grades 6 through 12 students that have already been identified for in-person support. They've had a number of interventions and supports already in place. They'll be receiving an invitation if this is approved. And all on the dial teaching staff will return to work in buildings. We'll be an all hands on deck to help support our students and to help support each other in this important work of moving forward. On February 25th and 26th, we would not have school for grades 6 through 8. We'll be providing the 2 state required transition days for the 6 through 8 grade teachers to prep and be ready for our students to start back. On March 1st, 4 weeks before spring break, we would propose grade 6 and GATE 4th through 5th grade that is housed at Stillwater Middle School, come back to an in-person learning model. 2 weeks later, on March 15th and 2 weeks before spring break, we would propose grades 7 through 8 returning to an in-person learning model. And on March 25th and 26th, 2 state required transition days for grade 9 through 12 teachers, no school for the students, 9 through 12 on that day. And April 5th, the beginning of the new grading period, we would be bringing back grades 9 through 12 all at once. Secondary students would return to school 4 days per week, continue to learn from home asynchronously on C days. So why are we doing this? Because many of our secondary teachers are teaching both an on the dial or in-person learning model as well as a distance learning model. And the state requires that when teachers are providing and working in both of those models, we provide staff with an equivalent, or teachers with an equivalent of a 30-minute prep per day extra on top of what they're already receiving. And that would be accounted for on the C days. This is a plan to safely return students to schools, and it would provide time for more of our staff to have that vaccine. Okay, students identified for in-person support. We are again proposing that they return to school on February 16th, grades 6 through 12. An invitation to students would that have already been identified would be sent out to families. And this would be due to lack of academic progress. The groups will be small and safe in accordance with our operational capacity and safe rollout plan. The goal would be to provide more support for students who need it the most. This could be academic, social, or emotional. It would be a full school day with transportation and meals provided. It would be a learning lab model using the current Schoology platform, where we would have peer support and students would have access to their teachers. Okay, just a quick summary with our plan to return students to schools. Preschool was able to start back the first week after winter break, 2 days per week. Beginning February 1st, they will be back 4 days per week. Grades K2 and site-based programs will return tomorrow. And the teachers just had 2 transition days. Excited to be out to schools to see the students returning. 4 days per week, 5 days per week beginning on March 1st. Grades 3 through 5, February 10th. All students 4 days per week, beginning March 1st, 5 days per week. The 4 days per week, just a quick note, the C days, which provides students asynchronous learning. Teachers will be working with families, communicating with families, working with small groups or individual students to help support any type of catch-up that they might need, as well as preparing to support students that might be out on quarantine for longer periods of time in the future while the class is still in session. Grades 6 through 12, pending board approval. We are proposing January 27th, which is tomorrow. The ALC, Alternative Learning Center, transitions 18 through 21 program and site-based programs will be starting back up. But pending board approval, February 16th, again, students identified for in-person support. There are prioritized students. March 1st, grade 6 and 4-5 gate. March 15th, grades 7 through 8. And April 5th, the start of a new grading period, grades 9 through 12. And with that, we are open to questions. And I have invited our 3 secondary principals to be here with us tonight to assist with answering any possible questions. So we do have Principal Bach from Stillwater Area High School. We have Principal Van Scoy from Stillwater Middle School, and Principal Fields that's at Oakland Middle School. And they should be on here in just a moment. Welcome. With that, we will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld. Does anyone have a question about the plan? Director Sherman.
I've gotten questions from the community, and I know this is relatively new information, but I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how the vaccines that are now kind of at that over 300 mark, how those are going to be allocated. What's the strategy? Because I'm assuming that a lot of the strategy is going to be to keep this recommendation alive. And so I just heard from community members regarding what is the strategy for the district going to be.
It looks like Dr. Cherry's also here to support that, and she's been involved with the vaccines. I will turn the time to her.
Thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld. An update on the vaccines. We're very excited to have a considerable increase in the number of appointment slots that will be available to our staff this week. Just to recap, as you heard, last week we had 17 appointment slots. This week rather, 369. That still doesn't cover all 1,000 plus employees that we are needing to make sure that we have the availability for. So in prioritizing who is slotted for one of those appointments first, we are following the MDH guidelines in that we are providing appointment priorities for those staff members who are currently teaching in person. We started first with the staff who work with students who do not regularly wear their masks. That was the highest occupational risk for our employees. So since then, and now we have a greater amount to go around, we have reprioritized that list for this week. We have been able now to offer these appointment slots to every single staff member who works with the students who do not wear a mask on a regular basis. And now we've expanded that out. The first priority is our employees who are working face-to-face with students. That means this week with our vaccination appointments, it is prioritizing our elementary staff first. And we are also categorizing the staff members by date of birth. And so our older staff members are seen to be at higher risk and are prioritized. One additional layer in there is we have been able to survey our staff. And so our staff have been able to tell us if they would like an appointment or not. And so we have been able to take a few staff members who have chosen for whatever reason to not want a vaccination so that they are not going to be contacted for those appointments.
Director Weisberg.
How do we have space and do we have time in the cafeteria for students in secondary to be 6 feet apart? And what I mean by time is, since you have to space everybody, you're not going to be able to fit as many people as you used to fit. So are you going to have to start lunch at a lot earlier in the day and finish a lot earlier? That's just my question, is how we're going to be able to space everybody 6 feet apart in the cafeteria.
Thanks for your question, Liz. I'll try to answer from Oakland's perspective. We are working through a lot of those logistics right now with our building engineers, but we will maintain our current lunch structure that we had in our hybrid model. And in doing that, we were able to have students spaced 6 feet apart in our cafeteria and be able to have 80 students per lunch. We would fall short in some of our lunches by up to 30 or 40 to be able to maintain that distance. So we're looking at creative alternatives. We have a gymnasium that we're able to use and protect the floor. That will have to be something that we pull together for our students and have them sit at tables. It's in close proximity to our cafeteria, but that would be our game plan to be able to maintain our lunches. Eric Van Scoy and I call them brunches anyways, even during our typical year, because they start around 10:15 a.m. So we would not have to lower our lunch time or extend it to be able to accommodate our students being back full in person.
It's a great question for us at the high school too, because certainly lunch is a constraint for us. It's a tricky one. There's no two ways around it. What we did at the high school during the first quarter, if you remember, was we ran an optional early release whereby students were granted permission to leave after their first 3 classes of the day and then continue an academic hour from home. So they were granted, or remotely, I should say, but they were granted permission to finish up their academic time during the day, from a remote spot. And what that allowed is that was really one of the only ways that we were able to get down to a manageable number in the cafeteria. And we were actually running probably 6 different lunch shifts ourselves at the high school to try to accommodate that. As Andy talked about, we also had seating that kind of spilled over into the gymnasium to make sure that we had accommodated enough. And we had developed a system whereby that was pretty fluid. And by the end, we were pretty dialed in with that, but we would have to switch once we hit a point in time where we bring students back, we would have to switch back to a model like that in order to accommodate lunch. That would be about the only way that we'd be able to do that in the cafeteria.
Okay, thank you. Director Riley.
Thank you. Given the fact that we now have an increased number of vaccines, that we have new information from the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics that basically states that there are very few, if any, instances of child to adult transmissions within the schools. That even transmissions from student to student within the schools is very low. Our own data supports that. We never had an outbreak in our schools. We had quarantine outbreak is what we had. And the fact that we are now allowed to adjust our quarantine guidelines, is there a reason we can't readjust the path that we have laid out here to bring back high school sooner?
Our slow rollout is very purposeful to keep people safe. We are excited to have the vaccines here, but we do know with the 369 vaccine slots that have been allocated, they have allocated many, many more slots than what they have vaccines for right now. And just on Monday, they changed it to a first come, first serve. So we do know this is going to take some time to have the vaccines in everybody's arm. That's why there's a focus on elementary. And if we can start to get everybody at the elementary school and anybody secondary working with the students to get those vaccines going and roll up, it's going to be a much better plan. We do know as well with the grading system, the schedules, the operations, setting up classrooms again. We have a massive undertaking at the secondary level to get things in place. And we know that if we did come back early, we would have to completely adjust the way the instruction is delivered. We would have to adjust the bell schedules, and there's going to be a lot of transitions. It comes at a time that's close to the end of a grading period, where at the secondary level, the grades are permanent grades on transcripts, and it would be a lot more difficult to catch those students and make sure we can get them to where they need to be by doing it another way. Yes, we could switch earlier, but are we providing the best service and instruction possible during this time? We feel that it would best serve our students to follow this plan, and a lot of thought has been put into this. And I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
I guess I'll just add specific to the high school, from a safety standpoint, the criteria that was established by the Minnesota Department of Health at the beginning of the summer that I think Superintendent Lansfeld included in one of her slides earlier, that criteria hasn't changed. And our numbers, the numbers that we look at that are close to us, that are local to us, are still well within a range that the recommendation came out earlier says secondary students should be in distance learning. And we know that high school students carry and transmit the disease as adults do. And while we were fortunate that, yes, there was not necessarily an outbreak that we're able to trace back to the high school, what I would say is from a capacity standpoint, we absolutely hit a point where we had difficulty continuing to be able to operate. And that involves your staff being tied up with contact tracing, when your staff is out on quarantining, when you have absences with students and staff. We hit a point where, again, we were not able to continue operating in the same manner. And that was the primary driver behind switching out of a hybrid model into a distance learning model. And so that's part of what we learned from our experience there. So while we didn't necessarily have an outbreak per se, certainly the capacity issues are very, very real for us to be able to operate our organization.
Thanks for that, Bob. Can I just, or sorry, Mr. Buck. It's already been a day of meetings. I kind of want to go back a little bit about that and the guidelines that were set this summer. And those were initially set when we started this before we knew much. And those guidelines are not in stone. And so the end all to this is that the district has the authority, and you can take that into consideration, what is going on in the community and that spread. But the district fell apart when we hit about 80, and most schools fall apart when you hit about 80 in the community. And even in the survey or this literature I'm reading in the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the spread isn't there, amongst that. And it was actually very even between, if you want to add middle school to high school into one lump, and then elementary in another section. So, I mean, in there it states that already, that the spread isn't there. We had, they have modified the contact tracing as far as, what our quarantine procedures are. So hopefully that improves and helps us, moving forward here. So I kind of want to push back a little bit on that statement. But all I want to say is that we have new data, new information now, and I would hope that we would, take that into consideration now, because we have been inundated with emails from parents wanting to get their kids back in school, and they are not happy about this two-month start.
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in and then I'll let Dr. Cherry go. Part of the reason for going slow, we've had a neighboring district just start up with elementary. And within it's the quarantine that's really wreaking havoc with operational capacity. In the first 3 days, 6 elementary classes are quarantined for 2 weeks. And so this is part of the reason to go slow, to go fast, so we're not back and forth like a pendulum. But that's a big part of the reason. I'll let Dr. Cherry.
Thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld. I'll actually add on to the statement of what a neighboring district has experienced in their first few days of in-person instruction at the elementary level, and bring that back locally here. We have notifications daily about our own teachers and staff who are testing positive for COVID-19. And so we anticipate the absences amongst our own staff to also continue to be an issue. And so we need to be thinking about sub-coverage and our capacity to address those issues. But going back to the other piece of your statement, Director Riley, is you are absolutely correct that we have local control, that it is the school board's responsibility to make this decision. And doing that, I think also we need to take into consideration that as a school district, we are required to consult with our regional support team. We did present this plan to our regional support team. They did have quite a few questions for us. And ultimately, they supported our plan because of the slow roll-up and the thoughtful consideration of being able to monitor the situation along the way. There was also some discussion about vaccines. And we do know those vaccines are coming. We're extremely excited about that, but they're not coming fast and furious. And I think that as we witness what's happened in just the last couple of weeks, it's hard to anticipate how quickly we will have access to vaccinations for every single staff member who needs it. So just taking into consideration, yes, absolutely, our school board needs to have that local control and make the decision. We also need to follow the guidance that we have in front of us, and the safe learning plan that's been provided by the state of Minnesota was revised in December, at the end of December again, and it does continue to differentiate elementary versus secondary. And secondary, we are still being guided by the chart and as was presented in one of the slides.
One more follow-up and then I'll drop it if I could. If you want to go back and compare the other districts, we had initially, 17 vaccinations that we were given, and the other districts were probably similar in the amount, which explains, why things are the way they are. But we are now, I'll just say close to one third, maybe close to half of our staff. Some have already been ill. Not everybody's going to need a vaccine. And so maybe I'm guessing totally random here, about half of our staff probably will be covered. So I think that is a different variable than the comparison of the other districts. So.
Director Probani.
Thank you. I think my question is to the administration. The last time we were here, we talked about, Melinda, you had talked about having distance learning staff also sometimes come to the classroom. This is an opportunity for us because of the number of vaccines that we have out there would cover most of our staff. I think it's an opportunity for us to leave the distant learning staff members to actually stay home wherever it is that they need to do the work from, instead of bringing them into the classroom. We have to find ways to mitigate opportunities so the spread doesn't increase if it does truly happen. So having them continue to work from home also gives you an opportunity to actually focus on the staff members that will be on the dial in terms of vaccinations. Not only that, but it also gives you an opportunity to provide vaccines to subs, because we may need a lot of subs, to the subs that will be in the classroom as well. So we can strategize by prioritizing those that will be in the classrooms as against those that will be working from home. I think it's an important thing we need to take that into consideration if we really want to prevent the spread, if it does happen, the spread of COVID. Secondly, though, I think one thing we need to realize is if we have one positive case in a class, you are going to have to quarantine all of the students in that class. So one positive can lead to about 20, 30 quarantine. So that's what we need to pay attention to. So we may not have an outbreak, but being quarantined for 14 days, or if you take the test as an adult and you're negative, 7 days. So you would need a SARB to be in that position to help support if that happens. So the SARBs also should be considered when we're talking about the vaccines. Thirdly, though, I know that, the principals have actually mentioned why the high school students will be coming back April 5th, the reason why that's the case. Yes, but we also have to take into consideration the mental health of our children. For me, I think that's the most important thing. A lot of our kids out there are having a lot of issues. I know parents have been really concerned. They bombarded us with a lot of emails. I think as a district, we need to pay attention to that. What are the kids coming in March or are they coming in April? It's still important that we respond to those concerns, because the last thing we want is to lose any students out there. We know teenagers are very busy. Teenagers want to go out there. There are restrictions. COVID has also played a huge role here. If we can't bring them earlier than April 5th, what are we doing to help mitigate so we keep our kids alive? Not only keeping our kids alive, but supporting the parents also to make sure our kids are sane. They're having all the support they need, both academically and mentally, before they come back to school April 5th.
Thank you, Director Porbini. First, you mentioned distance learning teachers. If they have been assigned to distance learning, they are still in distance learning and they can work from home, their classroom, or we have provided classroom space at Oak Park for distance learning teachers, because we do know many of them might have secondary health conditions and they do need to stay out of the schools as much as possible. So it's just on the dial, teachers and staff that we are asking to be back in schools on February 16th. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. Second, the positive case, you are correct. It can take one positive case and a large group of students, especially if they're in close quarters in a classroom. And the student or adult was positive while in the school environment. Most likely the entire classroom will be put on quarantine. And then third, let me also talk about subs really quick. They are critical. We do value them. There have been a lot of questions about subs with vaccines and bus drivers as well. We want our bus drivers vaccinated as well. But the top priority right now will be our district staff that are working specifically with students. And we're looking at, again, the age, if they're working with students that are unable to wear masks. And then we're starting at the elementary level, as well as the site-based programs at the high school that are running, and then we'll work our way out. But we do want to get to our subs, the subs that are hired full-time, that we've hired for the year, that are there every day. They are on that priority list. But the other subs, we do want to get to them, and we do want to get to the bus drivers. It's just that priority list needs to be followed. And then the mental health is very important to us as well. And I am encouraging people, please, if your child is struggling, contact the school, contact the teacher, contact the social worker, the counselor. Please let us know. We do have a lot of resources available. Speaking with a number of parents that I've asked to do this, they have done that, contacted schools at the elementary and secondary level. In every case, I've had families email me back and saying, thank you, I should have done this sooner. They were a lot of help, they were a lot of support, and that's why we're here. And if we don't have the resources, we can make some referrals, because we do know that that is a critical piece during this pandemic.
Dr. Cherry, did you want to add to that?
Thank you, Chair Petrie. I just wanted to make one clarification regarding quarantine. There was a comment that an entire class would be quarantined if a student in that class tested positive, and that may or may not be true. We follow contact tracing guidelines that are provided to us by the Department of Health, and we go through a very thorough contact tracing process where we look at where is that student been in our schools, in our school communities, and we put a bubble around that student. And those contact tracing guidelines have been updated multiple times throughout the year. And so our health services staff is apprised of all of those updates on a regular basis and walks us through that contact tracing process. And so it's not just the classroom of students, but it's also all of the activities, the bus, after school childcare, if that is something that is utilized. But it's walking through that child's schedule in the entire day, and then creating that bubble around them to see who they've been in close contact with.
Okay, Director Sherman.
I had a couple questions, so I'll just go through them and let you answer. But I guess first and foremost, because the secondary principals haven't been here recently, I want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing. It's just so much work, and it's so appreciated by every parent and student and the board. I also want to just take a minute, because there's no way to get back to everyone that has emailed the board. And honestly, opinions were all over the place. And so I know whatever decision we make, we're probably not going to make everyone happy. I wanted to touch base a little bit on questions I have been getting regarding why we're not doing hybrid and why it was deemed not educationally as beneficial for our students. And I guess I wanted to kind of hear a little bit more about that for the community. But as I was looking, I actually thought our plan, which I'm pleased with, seems to be really aggressively acknowledging that the best thing for our students is to be back 4 days a week at least. And I appreciate, when I was out there kind of comparing what other districts are doing when they're getting into a hybrid situation, my personal feeling is we all know that kids are better served when they're in person getting that face-to-face instruction. So I appreciate the district's plan here. I know it's going to be tough and a heavy hill to climb here, but I'm hopeful. And I think for me, the one thing I noticed in other districts that are doing hybrid, and so I guess I would ask for maybe superintendent, assistant superintendent, and principals, is that we don't do synchronous learning in our hybrid. So when students are doing hybrid, and I just want to make sure that parents understand this, because this is going to come up with our levy likely, but we don't have this dedicated tech levy. And so our technology in our classrooms aren't allowing for that synchronous experience. So if you're in 2 days a week and you're home 3 days a week, you're not getting that live instruction. And I'm sure that played into some of your thoughts on why maybe hybrid didn't best serve students. So I guess want to throw that out there first.
You are correct. We are doing, for the most part, an asynchronous hybrid model versus a synchronous. A big part of that is technology. And we might be going out for a possible tech levy, especially after this pandemic. We've seen the importance of technology. When we've connected with teachers and families, the student engagement has not been as high, anecdotally, with students in hybrid as it has been with the in-person and the distance learning. And we know that we are able to provide a more consistent instructional format in the distance learning and the in-person versus the hybrid. Not only it's more consistent and better instruction, the workload for our teachers, some teachers are putting in 70+ hours a week to pull off the hybrid because it's not synchronous. They are doing 2 different models together, and it's overwhelming. But they've been working. They want our kids to do their best, but it's not meant to be sustainable, the model that we're using.
Yes, Andy.
All right. Again, I think these are really good questions for our community to hear about. And I'll just give an example, because I think the question really is, why not consider hybrid instead of what our plan is recommending to the board, which is to come back in person. And I think as a group, we really had thoughtful dialogue about that. If we came back in hybrid, we would have 3 learning models still in place to switch in and out of. And each of those switches are extremely complicated. I know Eric Van Scoy has coined it as, we've had a start to the school year 4 times this year, a restart to the school year. And I agree with him. And I think by having distance learning be an option if our schools are unable to stay open, and having full in-person, I would rather have 2 options that we are using versus 3 and switching in and out. And I think ultimately our goal is to get our kids back in the building and do our very best to connect them to the services that we have. So that would be one of the reasons I know that we were very much in support of coming back in person.
Yes, Rob.
Wasn't sure if that yes was to me or not. I thought I was the only one with a hand up, but Director Sherman, I really appreciate the question, because it's one thing that we haven't quite talked about yet. But when I think about all of the things that went into our recommendation, we've touched on some of the safety aspects, we've touched on the capacity aspects, and certainly those are 2 things that are front and center. But the other piece really is quality of learning and the quality of instruction. And part of what we experienced through our experiment in this whole hybrid piece was the amount of differentiation was kind of driving everybody crazy. There was not really a way to systematize that and bring that in. As you pointed out, we don't really have the infrastructure technology-wise to be able to just run a live stream whereby teachers can teach and instruct a group of kids that's in front of them, and simultaneously instruct a group of students that's learning from home, and simultaneously instruct a group of students that is completely on the C schedule, doing whatever. Part of the feedback that we had gotten was that through the distance learning that we ran back last spring, and even with some of the asynchronous pieces that we tried to run early on in the fall, was that it was almost like there was too much flexibility. And there was an overwhelming amount of feedback from parents that indicated that they appreciated the structure that came with the synchronous instruction that we were running once we were able to switch into distance learning. And the other piece that our teachers appreciate is the consistency of being able to have all of your learners present at the same time. So they can deliver a lesson plan that's more in alignment with a lesson that they would be delivering in the classroom. Sure, we use technology as a different medium to get that instruction out there, but the consistency provided for a better run of things in the cost benefit analysis. Certainly no one is championing the idea of distance learning as the preferred model that any of us would want to instruct on. But given the experience that we've had with hybrid, given the experience that we had on distance learning, when we look at those two things relative to each other, there's a preponderance of evidence that indicates that we've got a better learning model on distance learning with the consistency that we have having all of our students in the same place at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I just had one more, sorry, Chair, I just had one more, and that was related to something that was already said. The social emotional piece is something that I'm really concerned about. And I get that this is all an operational challenge to make this all happen, but we have children, students, families in distress now. And so I'm wondering if there's any thought that's been given to any kind of maybe unique outreach that we can do during this time when we're deciding to stay, potentially stay distant in a distance learning model. I don't know what that would be, but I know we have fabulous counselors, people here, administrators, people here, but you know, I'm just thinking, are there, I don't know, book clubs, coffees, I really don't know what it would mean, but just social outlets that we could give these kids that maybe need that connection that they don't feel that they're currently having in the model. So I guess.
I would say part of that right now is the support for our prioritized students that have already been identified with multiple interventions and other connections and supports, bringing them back 6 through 12 on February 16th. So it's academic, social, emotional. They've already been identified and we've already been putting a lot of those supports. So that is quite unique. And there's a few hundred students that we will be doing that for. So that's a big piece. And again, please contact the school if you have concerns and the school's not aware of that at this time too, because we do have a lot of resources and referrals that we can offer families and students.
Director Parvani.
Thank you, Chair Petrie. My contribution here is really first and foremost to say thank you to all of you, to the administration, Superintendent Lansfield, you and your team. I know it's it's really complex and very difficult, but I still want to state this to our community, really. This is a great opportunity for us to really look at the kinds of support that we have in our school system, specifically with respect to what COVID has done to all of us. It's not business as usual. We will never be able to go back to the way things were done. So the question now is, what do we need to put in place to be able to help support the needs of our children, to help support the needs of our staff, and so we can continue to provide the education that we all want our children to have. COVID will stay with us, just like the common flu, but that also has changed how we operate, how we learn. What are we thinking to all of our community members that may be watching us right now? What is our responsibility now in terms of how we can help support process that would lead to the changes that are actually occurring right now? And Director Sherman, thank you very much for bringing up the technology part of it. The distance learning might be with us for a really, really long time. So whether we like it or not, we have to think of ways that we can help support our children, not only in the learning part of it, but also in the social, emotional part of it. So one thing that came to mind is we all have responsibilities, whether we're board members or we're parents in the community. What is our responsibility now? How can we support you? So what we're doing in terms of our collective collaboration is one that is not only impactful on the needs of our children, but will continue to be sustained. So it's a sustenance for me that is the most important thing. We may all not be able to go back into the classroom for health reasons. The children will be healthy, but they may have parents that have underlying health conditions or grandparents with underlying health conditions. So those kids may not be able to go back to the schools. So we will keep the distance learning. Majority of our children may be in schools, but some may be at home. So my question here is, what do we do? What is our purpose as members of our community? How can we support to make sure the learning process is just as quality for our distance learners as it is for our students on the dime? That's number one. Number two, in terms of social emotional support, beyond just reaching out to the schools, there are lots of parents volunteers out there that might be willing to participate in a process that could develop a plan to help support all children that are in need of such support. There could be things like a buddy program, an outreach program that could have students reaching out, peer support, reaching out to all the students. These are plans that could be developed by parent volunteers as well as staff members who are willing to develop a plan to help support these kids. Some parents or some children might not even speak when they're emotional or mental health problems. Parents may not even be aware that their kids are going through some of these problems. So how do we identify? We know children, teenagers like to speak for teenagers. They like to tell other teenagers their problems. So how do we help bring these children together? How do we help form an alliance where children probably that have never had friends before in the schools now develop friendship from these kinds of partnerships? So these are the kinds of things from my perspective that I think that we should allow some of our parents in who are willing to help support this process, because you can't do it alone. There's much more out there. We didn't do any survey to actually find out what the needs of those parents or children will be. So bringing parents in, having those sessions with them, at least we will get some feedback from parents and be able to develop a plan that could help support these children, as long as we have most of our kids also involved in that process. It's my 2 cents.
I just, every district, great input, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. A lot of people are thinking the same thing across the state, and every district's in the same situation, and we are learning a lot. The silver lining to this pandemic is it's forced us to change and rethink how we do things. It's forced us to look at technology, instruction, that social emotional piece. And the state has also realized this. So on Monday, they just announced the governor's new plan called Due North, and they're going to put some money behind what they want to do, including $54 million just for summer programming to try and support and catch students up. It's a 7-pronged plan that was announced by Governor Walz. So its focus, meet the needs of students during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Every student receives a world-class education. Every student learns a safe and nurturing, or learns in a safe and nurturing environment. Every student learns in a classroom with caring and qualified teachers. They want to expand access to opportunities for students of color and Indigenous students, expand access to opportunities for students in Greater Minnesota, and fund a 21st century education. So this really has a strong equity focus, and it's support for all students. We just start getting the details out. So this will help support us with resources to put a lot of what you just spoke to in place.
Thank you. Director Hockert.
Thanks, Chair Petrie. I have a lot of questions, and I've really appreciated kind of hearing everybody else's questions. My biggest thing I'd like to say is thank you for allowing us some time from hearing our first presentation of this at the board meeting the other night, and then giving us some time to get some feedback from the community. I feel like that's been really helpful in helping all of us better understand the whole plan that's laid in front of us. And to be perfectly honest, I was pretty surprised at the feedback that I did receive with the elementary school rollout. It was pretty much everybody's like, yay, let's do this. But for the secondary, there's been a lot more concerns, and the emails coming in have been roughly like maybe a 60-40 split of people, again, being very excited, but then quite a few people being very nervous and advising against this. So my questions have kind of fallen all across the board with this. A big piece coming from the community that we've been hearing is how can the community support our schools? And people have been throwing out all kinds of ideas on how they can help speed this process up and get schools open more quickly, which is one line. And I think that there is an opportunity, possibly if we can get some information out and take people up on some offers, or see what people could support the district with might go a long way in helping people feel more connected with us. And then kind of on the flip side, looking at the teachers and the safety and the student safety as well. And my question actually goes to the principals who are here. Kind of how confident are you as administrators in rolling out this plan in keeping our teachers safe and keeping our students safe, since this is the population in secondary schools that is going to be more vulnerable to this disease? How do you, how confident are you that this is the best plan for our students to roll out?
Who wants to start with that?
Eric, you've been pretty quiet tonight. How about you take it?
My staff, I think, is really surprised at how quiet I've been, because usually I talk their ear off. But, you know, we're very confident that we're going to be able to implement all the mitigation strategies laid out by the governor. I think at the beginning of the school year, we were all kind of curious how our kids were going to respond and how willing they would be to following all of these new guidelines. The kids have been amazing. The kids wear their masks. We put a line down the middle of the hallway at school, and kids are calling out other kids like, oh, we walk on the right side of the hallway. And, you know, they're telling teachers, excuse me, Mr. Van Scoy, you're on the incorrect side of the hallway. So our students have been doing an amazing job of making sure that they're keeping everybody safe. They're not hanging on each other and touching each other, and they're using their hand sanitizer when they enter the room. We have hand sanitizing stations at each and every one of our doors for our classrooms. And of course, our teachers are doing everything possible they can do to make sure that they're keeping themselves and the students safe. They're not congregating for lunch. They're cutting out a lot of the social interactions that they're used to having and they enjoy at work. So we're very confident that they're going to be able to continue doing that. It's still a risk, right? But we know that we have all the things in place that we possibly can for them. We've ordered all of the plexiglass that we need to make sure that when they're conversing with kids that they have yet another barrier in front of them. So again, we have high confidence in our ability to keep our staff and students safe.
I guess to, you know, Eric's point, to follow up on that and piggyback on that a little bit, you know, certainly there's no such thing as a silver bullet, right? I mean, we all know that there is no grand solution. If there was, someone would have figured it out and everyone would be replicating that, and we'd all have that by now. So what we've done is we've engaged as many people as possible to come up with the plan that we can be as confident in as we can. And like I said earlier, we have some experience with the hybrid model because we experienced that. We lived that through first quarter, and we were able to make that work. We felt good about that. And I think most of our staff too were sorry to see our kids go at a point in time when we did go to distance learning and transition to that. But after having gone through that transition and learning what we've now been able to experience through the course of second quarter, that's what led to the recommendation that's before you tonight. And I think the other piece that goes along with that is the other part of the recommendation is there is a return to school, right? And the idea that if we can make that return to school coincide, as Superintendent Lansfeld said earlier, with the end of a grading period, and this kind of actually ties back to something that Principal Fields brought up earlier too. Our hope is that that will minimize the number of potential transitions that we have to continue to make. You know, unfortunately, while the graphic was a great one to help our community understand the concept of turning the dial, right, and what learning on the dial was and meant, in some respects, it's very difficult for us because it's not just as simple as flipping the dial. You know, we're turning a battleship here, and there are a million different logistical things that go into making that transition. So as Andy had said earlier, if we can stay in one model through a given grading period, knowing that we're going to have an apples to apples instructional model for a time that kids are going to be assessed and earning a grade, and then at the end of that grading period, know that we'll have another transition, and we've kind of waited a certain amount of time, By that point in time, more vaccinations will be prevalent in the community. We'll continue to have time to figure out the safety measures that we're going to implement around school when kids do come back. And that's going to maximize the probability for success when we do bring kids back, so that hopefully we don't have to flip out of that model again. What I really wouldn't want to see at the high school, where we've got a grading model, is I would hate to see us bring kids back early only to have to transition back out of that again right before the end of a grading period, when, as Superintendent Lansfeld said, kids are getting set to have marks put on their transcripts. If we can continue the apples to apples consistency comparison through the course of third quarter, there's a natural transition time that's built in at fourth quarter. And that does match philosophically with what a lot of other districts are doing. It doesn't match up perfectly calendar wise, because they might be on a different schedule, but from a philosophical approach, that's what a number of other people are doing. And that's part of, I think, what I would feel confident into.
I would just add, in agreement with what my colleagues have said, I appreciate the encouragement from this school board in recognizing how hard this work is. But I think all of us know that the champions that are out here are our teachers that are developing programming and adjusting to everything that's been going on. And I would just say that our teachers are encouraged by the vaccination, and our teachers are thrilled at the opportunity to work with their students. And that's what I'm hearing from my staff.
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Cherry, did you have something to add?
Yes, I would like to just follow up on the other part of Director Hockert's question of what can the community and what can the families do to help us get students back in school. And one of the primary things everyone can do is to also follow all of those COVID spread mitigation techniques. Wear a mask, wash your hands, stay home if you're sick. And for us in school is to make sure, as parents and family members, you're notifying the school if your student is sick, and especially if your student has tested positive for COVID-19, so we can respond to that very quickly to mitigate any potential spread in our schools.
Thank you. Director Weisberg.
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Thank you. I think I've been pretty clear the whole time we've been talking about this. I can't vote for this. I as thought out as it is, and I appreciate everybody that's worked on it. I don't want anybody to think that I don't know how much work has gone into this. I know that people have gone above and beyond trying to think of ways we can do this the safest way, and I really appreciate all the work. I wish we could stay distant until everybody is vaccinated. And to me, that would be to the end of the year. And I know that's going to make some people happy. And I know that's going to make some people furious. And like somebody said earlier, we've gotten emails that are literally all over the place as far as what people want to do. The thing that still gets to me is parents and students have choice. Our teachers don't. And I'm thrilled to hear that we have that many more vaccines coming to teachers that are going to want to take them. But even with the vaccine, the first shot takes 2 weeks for you to have 50% of efficacy of the vaccine. And then you have to wait a full month to have the next shot. So it's not an instant cure. It's not a cure at all, but it's not an instant fix. That also takes time. And I just want people to realize that too, that that's part of the slow rollout. And as much as I don't want us to be back until this is gone, I really, really appreciate the slow rollout. And I just wanted to add that part of it is that the vaccine takes a while to become effective, and it's going to take a while for everybody to get it who wants it. But I appreciate all the work that everybody has done. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Onken.
No question, just quick comment. Yes, we have gotten a ton of emails from community members, and yes, they are on all sides, and much as myself, and I think everybody all kind of wants to armchair quarterback this a little bit. The thing I've been most impressed with tonight is that you guys have not stumbled on any of the questions that have been asked, which leads me to believe that you guys have thought this out very well. Is it going to be perfect? No. Would we like to have our kids back in school sooner? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. but this seems like it has been well thought out, well planned out, and it gives the room for hopefully for us to not have to pull kids back out again. Hopefully there's enough lag time in there to make sure that that does not need to take place. So I will be voting for this. I think I think at this point it's probably the best way to go, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Director Sherman.
A couple other community members, and since we have the principals here and everyone here, I just want to give everyone a chance to answer this, because people were looking at spring break on calendar. And, are we asking families, are we, is any special instructions going to people? Are we asking them to quarantine themselves after they travel? How are we going to try to, because usually we see that spike, and it's going to be really important to have a strong start if we're going to kind of climb this hill and end the year in a 4-day in-person fashion. Have you guys given any thought to how that's going to work? Dr. Cherry, anyone, I guess?
We have had that conversation, and communication is going out. And Dr. Cherry, I don't know if you'd like to take that, but go ahead.
Yes, we are very aware of the MDH guidelines around quarantine following travel. We have provided some guidance on our website, so you will be able to find it there. But as a school district, we do see school as an essential activity and work as an essential activity. Those are things where we would expect all of our staff and our students to come back to us and would eliminate any needless travel. But this is an essential activity. So we would ask all of our members to come back to the school community and continue to follow all of the mitigation strategies of ensuring that masks are worn, that health information is checked on a daily basis before you arrive at school, and to stay home if you're sick and to be tested.
Now, if you look at the maps that the CDC is putting out for travel, just about every country is in red right now. So you should take caution and research before you go out.
And just to follow up to that is we are also considered in red. So staying home and going out in our own community is the same level of risk.
Thank you. Director Hockert.
Thanks. That kind of brought up an additional question coming from community members and also from students as well, is are there opportunities for kids to do social stuff in schools, like clubs and music programs and theater? Are there going to be opportunities for students outside of sports to participate once we go back to school or before, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we do have opportunities for kids to participate, and we do have a number of community ed classes running right now that are implementing the mitigation strategies. And I would encourage people, if they are looking for activities for students, to go to that community education site and take a look at that. And we can also have people call the schools for other resources.
So I've now heard from a couple of board members who are very interested in that, in the whole idea about helping students with that social aspect, the things that they're missing out on before they go back to school. And I know that we have also heard from a couple of community members who are also interested in this sort of thing. And I am just wondering if it might be something that the board could form some sort of an ad hoc group to explore with some of these community members, if there are ways for us to help ease that lack of social connection, at least until students get back into school. And I'm thinking about some of the high school students now in particular, because, you know, April 5th must seem a long way out. Away. So I am just wondering if there would be any interest by anyone on the board to work that problem. I'm kind of thinking now about like when the community sort of came together and created that graduation parade for students last year. That was kind of an, this community is just so wonderful in terms of supporting our schools. And I'm just wondering if that might be something that people would be interested in exploring. Anybody interested in? Okay, I see a couple of members. I think I'll get together with you then, Katie and Allison, and if anybody else is interested, please let me know, Melinda, and we'll start exploring this and seeing if there is something that can be done to, I know that students are just feeling so, a lot of them are just feeling so adrift. I mean, we are all feeling adrift right now in the middle of winter. But maybe there's something that we can do to help those students. So I will get together with a couple of board members tomorrow. We'll see where we can go with that idea. Director Riley.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I appreciate all the work that everybody has put into this. I really, really do. The initial vote we had to go into this learning model, I did not vote for. And it is precisely the reason that there was no plan to come back. And as you guys have worked through all of this, I have a difference of opinion, given that we have new data, new information, new understanding of things, new precautions. I just wish it could bring our high school kids back sooner. I really, really do. I think parents really need to get their families back on track. I certainly hope that one day we will be able to have business as usual. I hope that this doesn't last forever. I think we all need to have some sort of normalcy again. And the sooner we can get everybody back in, the teachers are doing one thing, not 80 things, for different families, I think would be beneficial for everybody's mental health. And I just want to say, Principal Vanskoy, thank you very much for preparing our students to drive a car. Staying in the right side of the lane.
Thank you. Director Onken.
Just another quick comment too. I know, again, going back to the emails that we received, we're certainly, the decision we make tonight is it's not going to be one that the entire community is going to be on board with. I think we're all aware of that, and this is going to be a tough one. But I think unless there's any new information, I think can we call the question?
Can
Director Lansfeld.
I just want to say one last thing before you do take a vote. It is Paraprofessional Recognition Week. I promised to get this in, and the paras have been in childcare. They've been in classrooms. They've been in site-based programs, special ed. They've been on the front line. So thank you to all of the paraprofessionals through this. So just sorry, had to get that in. They're very important to us.
And Director Onken, we can't really call the question because we don't actually have a motion on the floor right now. We kind of had we had an informational presentation there, and we sort of went into questions from there. I just have a couple of really quick questions before we prepare for a motion. I kind of wanted to go back just a little bit and get someone to give me a comparison as to what we're doing compared to other districts around us, and also other districts of about the same size, so that we can kind of put that into perspective. I know that in some regards, ours, as I understand it, our plan is a little bit different because we are not going back to hybrid, whereas I think that most districts are. And so I just like someone to address that and kind of give us that context.
Yeah, the secondary principals can jump in, but I would just like to say again that we are on a different grading system schedule than a lot of our neighboring districts that are on a trimester. We are on a semester. A lot of those districts, the new grading period starts March 15th. Ours starts April 5th. A number of districts have not set a return date yet, quite a few. Hearing through the grapevine, some will be less aggressive, some will be more. Every district has different nuances, different needs. Some districts have more technology than we have, some don't, some that are trying hybrid. are also dismissing early during the day, every day. So you do have to take a lot of the details into consideration. And one size does not fit all. We put a lot of thought into this. We try to have a lot of feedback, and we really do want to try and do what's best for our students and what's best for our staff while still keeping safety in mind too.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question that I had was had to do with the, I know that the teachers are going to be back in their classrooms as of February 16th, I believe, and then you're going to be inviting students in who might need a little extra help. Who's going to be helping them? Because the teachers will be teaching their classes during the day. So how exactly can someone explain to me how that help is going to work?
Okay, does somebody want to take this?
I can talk again, if you don't mind. What we're planning to do is we have paraprofessionals and some of our permanent subs that we've hired for the school year who are going to be available to work with those students. They're already working with a lot of those students through the interventions that we've put in place. And so what we'd be able to do is bring those students into school, working with those paraprofessionals in a distance learning format while they're at school. So that's what we're planning to do. But of course, our teachers, when they're in the building, they want to get a hold of those kids. And so they'll still have the opportunity to say, will you send, Billy down to the classroom, please? I want to sit there with them. And I really want to show them what slope intercept form looks like, because I know that if I sit there, 6 feet away and show him what to do, he's going to be able to do it better than doing it over the computer screen. So they're going to be in a room together, a group of 15 to 20 students working with a paraprofessional, but they'll still have access throughout the school to their teachers.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add from a high school perspective, Chair Petrie, no, I apologize. We also have 2 sections or segments of office hours that are built into our day. And so teachers could theoretically have access to students during those office hours times. You're correct. And as Principal Van Scoy said, we'll have other paraprofessional staff or supervisory staff kind of working with students during the class segment time. But there would be an opportunity for some direct interaction between teacher and student during the office hours segment at the beginning of the day, and then also at the end of the day, which we think is an advantage to having them in.
Okay, thank you. Director Weisberg.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. When we're talking about the amount of vaccines that are available, are those to teachers and the paras that will both be in contact?
Yes, and then many instances, the paras, they're working directly with the students that cannot or unable to wear masks. They're at a high priority. It goes for all staff within the school. They're being prioritized.
Thank you.
Director Onken.
Okay, I'm going to move that we accept the superintendent's recommendations to move back into in-person learning.
Thank you. Is there a second? Director Sherman. Okay, any further discussion on this question? Seeing none, I'll ask Joan to take the roll call.
Director Acker?
Yes.
Director Onken?
Yes.
Director Porbenny?
Yes.
Director Riley?
No, only because the students aren't returning fast enough.
Director Sherman?
Yes.
Director Weisberg? Chair Petrie?
Yes.
You have a 5-2 vote. Motion passes.
Thank you, Joan. And that is the end of our work for tonight. So I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.